they also had entered that forest of shining glass columns, if Moraine had not arranged a special vision for him. Does everyone see the same things inside those columns, Ruark? No, Mullane snapped, eyes like green steel. Be silent or send Analine and Matrim away. You must go too, Egwene. It is not permitted, Amis said, in a just slightly softer voice, to speak of what occurs within Rhuidean, except with those who have been there. A fraction softer, maybe. Even then, few speak of it, and seldom. I mean to change what is permitted and what isn't, Rand told them levelly. Become used to it. He caught Egwene muttering about him needing his ears boxed and grinned at her. Egwene can stay too, since she asked so nicely. She stuck her tongue out at him, then blushed when she realized what she had done. Change, Ruark said. You know he brings change, Amis. It is wondering what change and how that makes us like children alone in the dark. Since it must be, let it begin now. No two clan chiefs I have spoken with have seen through the exactly same eyes, Rand, or exactly the same things, until the sharing of water, and the meeting where the agreement of Rhuidean was made. Whether it is the same for wise ones, I do not know, but I suspect it is. I think it is a matter of bloodlines. I believe I saw through the eyes of my ancestors, and you yours. Amis and the other wise ones glowered in grimly sullen silence. Mat and Egwene wore equally confused stares. Lan alone seemed not to be listening at all. His eyes looked inward, no doubt in worry over Moraine. Rand felt a little strange himself, seeing through his ancestors' eyes. He had known for some time that Tamil Thor was not his real father, that he had been found as a newborn on the slopes of Dragon Mountain after the last major battle of the Aiel War. A newborn with his dead mother, the Maiden of the Spear. He had claimed Aiel blood in demanding admittance to Rhuidean, but the fact of it was just now being driven home. His ancestors. Aiel. Then you saw Rhuidean just begun building too, he said. And the two Aes Sedai, you heard what one of them said? He will destroy you. I heard. Ruark looked resigned, like a man who had learned his leg had to be cut off. I know. Rand changed the subject. What was the sharing of water? The clan chief's eyebrows lifted in surprise. You did not recognize it, but then I do not see why you should. You have not grown up with the histories. According to the oldest stories, from the day the breaking of the world began until the day we first entered the threefold land, only one people did not attack us. One people allowed us water freely when it was needed. It took us long to discover who they were. That is done with now. The Pledge of Peace was destroyed. The tree killers spat in our faces. Cairhien, Rand said. You're talking about Cairhien and Avendor Aldera and Laemon cutting down the tree. Laemon is dead for his punishment, Ruark said in a flat voice. The Oathbreakers are done with. He looked at Rand sideways. Some, such as Couladin, take it for proof we can trust no one who is not Aiel. That is a part of why he needs you. A part of it. He will take your face and blood for lies. Or claim he does. Rand shook his head. Moraine sometimes talked
doing
of
good
complexity
today.
of age lace.
It had a
The
safe
pattern of
week.
an age.
Yeah, well,
woven
safe
by the
day.
weave of time. From the thread of human
We
life.
had a safe weekend too.
If the ancestors of the Cairhien had not allowed the Aiel to have water 3,000 years ago, then Cairhien would never have been given the right to use the Silk Path across the waste. With a cutting from Avendor Sora for a pledge. No pledge, and King Laemon would have had no tree to cut down. There would have been no Aiel War. He could not have been born on the side of Dragonmount to be carried off and raised in the Two Rivers. How many more points like that had there been, where a single decision, one way or another, affected the weave of the pattern for thousands of years? 1,000 times 1,000 tiny branching points. 1,000 times that many, all twitching the pattern into a different design. He himself was a walking branching point, and maybe Matt and Perrin too. What they did or did not do would send ripples ahead through the years, through the ages. He looked at Matt, hobbling up the slope with the aid of his spear, head down and eyes squinted in pain. The Creator could not have been thinking to set the future on the shoulders of 3 farm boys. I can't drop it. I have to carry the load, whatever the cost. At the Wise One's low, wall-less tents, the women ducked inside with murmurs about water and shade. Matt with them. His head and throat hurt. He not only did so silently. He started to follow, but Lan laid a hand on his shoulder. Did you see her in there? The warder asked. No, Lan. I'm sorry. I did not. She'll come out safe if anyone can. Lan grunted and took his hand away. Watch out for Couladin, Rand. I've seen his kind before. Ambition burns in his belly. He would sacrifice the world to achieve it. Unalive speaks the truth, Rourke said. The dragons will not matter if you are dead before the clan chiefs learn of them. I will make sure some of Hiren's Jindo are always near you until we reach Cold Rocks. Even then, Couladin will probably try to make trouble, and the Shido at least will follow him. Perhaps others too. The prophecy of Rudian said you would be raised by those not of the blood. Yet Couladin may not be the only one to see only a wetlander. I will try to watch my back, Rand said dryly. In the stories, when somebody fulfilled a prophecy, everyone cried, "Behold," or some such. And that except for dealing with the villains. Real life did not seem to work that way. When they entered the tent, Matt was already seated on a gold-tasseled red cushion with his coat and shirt off. A woman in a cowled white robe had finished washing the blood from his face and was just beginning on his chest. Amis gripped a stone mortar between her knees, blending some ointment with a pestle, while Bear and Sienna had their heads together over herbs brewing in a pot of hot water. Melaine grimaced at Lan and Ruark, then fixed Rand with cool green eyes. "Stripped to the waist," she said curtly. "The cuts on your head do not seem too bad, but let me see what has you hunched over." She struck a small brass gong, and another white-robed woman ducked in at the back of the tent, a steaming silver basin in her hands and cloths over her arm. Rand took a seat on a cushion, making himself sit up straight. "That's nothing to worry yourself about," he assured her. The second woman in white knelt gracefully by his side, and resisting his efforts to take the damp cloths she wrung out in the basin, began gently washing his face. He wondered who she was. She looked Aiel, but she certainly did not act it. Her gray eyes held a determined meekness. "It is an old injury," Egwene told the sun-haired wise one. "Moraine has never been able to heal it properly." The look she gave Rand said common courtesy should have made him tell as much. From the glances that passed among the wise ones, though, he thought she had said more than enough already. A wound Aes Sedai could not heal, that was a puzzle to them. Moraine seemed to know more about him than he knew about himself, and he had a hard time dealing with her. Maybe it would go easier with the wise ones if they had to guess about him. Matt winced as Amis began rubbing her ointment into the slashes on his chest. If it felt anything like it smelled, Rand thought he had cause to wince. Bear shoved a silver cup at Matt. "Drink, young man. Dimson root and silverleaf will help your headaches if anything can." He did not hesitate before gulping it down. A shudder and a twisted face followed. "Tastes like the inside of my boots." But he gave her a seated bow, formal enough for a tyrant, except for his being shirtless, and only spoiled a bit by his sudden grin. I thank you, wise one, and I won't ask if you added anything just to give it that memorable taste. Bear and Sienna's soft laughter might have come because they had, or because they had not. But it seemed that, as usual, Matt had found a way to get on the good side of the women. Even Mylene gave him a brief smile. Ruark, Rand said, if Couladin thinks to make difficulties, I need to jump ahead of him. How do I go about telling the other clan chiefs? About me? About these? He shifted his dragon-twined arms. The white-robed woman at his side, cleaning the long gash in his hair now, deliberately avoided looking at them. There is no set formality, Ruark said. How could there be for a thing that will happen only once? When there must be a meeting between clan chiefs, there are places where something like the Peace of Rhuidean holds. The closest to Cold Rocks, the closest to Rhuidean, is Alcair Dal. You could show proofs to the clan and sept chiefs there. Alcair Dal, Matt said, giving it a subtly different sound. The Golden Bowl? Ruark nodded. A round canyon, though there is nothing golden about it. There is a ledge at one end, and a man who stands there can be heard by anyone in the canyon without raising his voice. Rand frowned at the dragons on his forearms. He was not the only one to have been marked in some way in Rhuidean. Matt no longer spoke a few words of the old tongue now and then, without knowing what he was saying. He understood, since Rhuidean, though he did not appear to realize it. Egwene was watching Matt, thoughtfully. She had spent too much time with Aes Sedai. Ruark, can you send messengers out to the clan chiefs? He said. How long will it take to ask them all to Alcair Dal? What will it take to make sure they come? Messengers will take weeks, and more weeks for everyone to gather. Ruark's gesture took in all four wise ones. They can speak to every clan chief in his dreams in one night, to every sept chief, and every wise one, to make sure no man takes it for just a dream. I appreciate your confidence that we can move mountains, shade of my heart, Amys said wryly, settling herself beside Rand with her ointment. But that does not make it so. It would take several nights to do what you suggest, with little rest in them. Rand caught her hand as she started to rub the sharp-smelling mixture on his cheek. Will you do it? Are you so eager to destroy us? She demanded, then bit her lip vexedly as the white-cowled woman on Rand's other side started. Mylene clapped her hands twice. Leave us, she said sharply, and the women in white bowed their way out with basins and cloths. You goad me like a needle burn next to the skin, Amys told Rand bitterly. Whatever they are told, those women will talk now of what they should not know. She pulled her hand free, began rubbing in the ointment with perhaps more energy than was necessary. It stung worse than it smelled. I do not mean to goad you, Rand said, but there is no time. The Forsaken are loose, Amys, and if they find out where I am, or what I plan... The Aiel women did not seem surprised. Had they known already? 9 still live. Too many. And those that don't want to kill me think they can use me. I have no time. If I knew a way to bring all the clan chiefs here now and make them accept me, I'd use it. What is it you plan? Amys's voice was as stony as her face. Will you tell the chiefs to come to Alcair Dal? For a long moment she met his stare. When she finally nodded, it was grudging. Begrudged or not, some of the tension went out of him. There was no way to win back 7 lost days, but perhaps he could avoid losing more. Moraine, still in Rhuidean, with Aviendha, held him here yet, though. He could not simply abandon her. You knew my mother, he said. Egwene leaned forward, as intent as he, and Matt shook his head. Amys's hand paused on his face. I knew her. Tell me about her, please. She shifted her attention to the slash above his ear. If a frown could have healed, he would not have needed her ointment. Finally, she said, Shahil's story, as I know it, begins when I was still Father Ismai. More than a year before I gave up the spear. A number of us had ranged almost to the Dragon Wall together. One day we saw a woman, a golden-haired young wetlander in silks, with pack horses and a fine mare to ride. A man we would have killed, of course, but she had no weapon beyond a simple knife at her belt. Some wanted to run her back to the Dragon Wall naked. Egwene blinked. She seemed continually surprised at how hard the Aiel were. Amis continued without pause, yet she seemed to be searching determinedly for something. Curious, we followed, day by day, without letting her see. Her horses died, her food ran out, her water. But she did not turn back. She stumbled on afoot until finally she fell and could not rise. We decided to give her water and ask her story. She was near death, and it was a full day before she could speak. Her name was Shahil, Ran said when she hesitated. Where was she from? Why did she come here? Shahil, Bear said, was the name she took for herself. She never gave another in the time I knew her. In the old tongue, it would mean the woman who is dedicated. Matt nodded agreement, not seeming to realize what he had done. Lan eyed him thoughtfully over a silver cup of water. There was a bitterness in Shahil in the beginning, she finished. Sitting back on her heels beside Rand, Amis nodded. She spoke of a child abandoned, a son she loved, a husband she did not love. Where, she would not say. I do not think she ever forgave herself for leaving the child. She would tell little beyond what she had to. It was for us she had been searching, for Maidens of the Spear. An Aes Sedai called Jitara Moroso, who had the foretelling, had told her that disaster would befall her land and her people, perhaps the world, unless she went to dwell among the Maidens of the Spear, telling no one of her going. She must become a maiden, and she could not return to her own land until the maidens had gone to Tarvalin. She shook her head wonderingly. You must understand how it sounded then. The maidens go to Tarvalin. No Aiel had crossed the Dragon Wall since the day we first reached the Threefold Land. It would be another 4 years before Laemon's crime brought us into the wetlands. And certainly no one not Aiel had ever become a Maiden of the Spear. Some of us thought her mad from the sun. But she had a stubborn will. And somehow we found ourselves agreeing to let her try. Jitara Moroso. And Aes Sedai with the foretelling. Somewhere he had heard that name, but where? And he had a brother. A half-brother. Growing up, he had wondered what it would be like to have a brother or a sister. Who and where? But Amis was going on. Almost every girl dreams of becoming a maiden, and learns at least the rudiments of bow and spear, of fighting with hands and feet. Even so, those who take the final step and wed the spear discover they know nothing. It was harder for Shahil. The bow she knew well, but she had never run as far as a mile, or lived on what she could find. A 10-year-old girl could beat her, and she did not even know what plants indicate water. Yet she persevered. In a year, she had spoken her vows to the spear, become a maiden, adopted into the Chumai sept of the Tardad. And eventually she had gone to Tarvalin with the maidens, to die on the slopes of Dragonmount. Half an answer, and leaving new questions. If he could only have seen her face. You have something of her in your features, Sienna said, as though reading his thoughts. She had settled herself cross-legged with a small silver cup of wine. Less of John Dwyn. John Dwyn, my father. Yes, Sienna said. He was a clan chief of the Tardad then, the youngest in memory. Yet he had a way to him, a power. People listened to him and would follow him, even those not of his clan. He ended the blood feud between Tardad and Nakai after 200 years, and made alliance not only with the Nakai, but with the Rain. And the Rain were not far short of blood feud. He very nearly ended the feud between Sharad and Goshin as well, and might have, had Lehman not cut down the tree. Young as he was, it was he who led the Tardad and Nakai, the Rain and Sharad, to seek Lehman's blood price. Was. So he was dead now too. Egwene wore sympathy on her face. Rand ignored it. He did not want sympathy. How could he feel loss for people he had never known? Yet he did. How did John Dwyn die? The wise ones exchanged hesitant glances. At last, Amis said, "It was the beginning of the 3rd year of the search for Lehman, when Shail found herself with child. By the laws, she should have returned to the Threefold Land. A maiden is forbidden to carry the spear while she carries a child. But John Dwyn could forbid her nothing. Had she asked the moon on a necklace, he would have tried to give it to her. So she stayed. And in the last fight before Tavalen, she was lost, and the child was lost. John Dwyn could not forgive himself for not making her obey the law. He gave up his place as clan chief, Lyra said. No one had ever done that before. He was told it could not be done, but he simply walked away. He went north with the young men to hunt Trollocs and Myrtle in the Blight. It is a thing wild young men do, and maidens with less sense than goats. Those who returned said he was killed by a man, though. They said John Dwyn claimed this man looked like Shail, and he would not raise his spear when the man ran him through. Dead then. Both dead. He would never lose his love for Tam, never stop thinking of him as father, but he wished he could have seen John Dwyn and Shail just once. Egwene tried to comfort him, of course, the way women did. There was no use trying to make her understand that what he had lost was something he had never had. For memories of parents, he had Tamlin Thor's quiet laugh, and dimmer remembrance of Cariel Thor's gentle hands. That was as much as any man could want or need. She seemed disappointed, even a little upset with him, and the wise ones appeared to share the feeling to one degree or another, from Bear's openly disapproving frown to Melane's sniff and ostentatious shifting of her shawl. Women never understood. Ruark and Lan and Mat did. They left him alone, as he wanted. For some reason, he did not feel like eating when Melaine had food brought, so he went to lie at the edge of the tent with one of the cushions under his elbow, where he could watch the slope and the fog-shrouded city. The sun blasted the valley and the surrounding mountains, burning the shadows. The air that eddied into the tent seemed to come from an open oven. After a time, Mat came over wearing a clean shirt. He sat beside Rand without speaking, peering into the valley below, the strange spear propped on his knee. Now and again he felt the cursive script carved into the blind. "How is your head?" Rand asked, and Mat jumped. "It doesn't hurt anymore." He jerked his fingers away from the carving and folded his hands deliberately in his lap. "Not as much, anyway. Whatever that was they mixed up, it did the trick." He fell silent again, and Rand let him. He did not want to talk either. He could almost feel time passing, grains of sand in the hourglass dropping one by one ever so slowly. But everything seemed to tremble, too. The sand ready to explode in a torrent. Foolish. He was just being affected by the shimmering heat haze rising from the mountain's bare rock. The clan chiefs could not reach Alcair Dal one day sooner if Moraine appeared before him that instant. They were only a part, anyway, and maybe the least important part. A little while later, he noticed Bland squatting easily atop the same granite outcrop Couladin had used, paying no mind to the sun. The warder was watching the valley, too. Another man who did not want to talk. Rand refused a midday meal, too, though Egwene and the Wise Ones took turns trying to make him eat. They seemed to take his refusal calmly enough, but when he suggested returning to Rhuidean to look for Moraine, and Aviendha for that matter, Moraine exploded. "You fool, man. No man can go twice to Rhuidean. Even you would not come back alive. Go starve if you want to." She threw half a round loaf of bread at his head. Mat caught it out of the air and calmly began eating. "Why do you want me to live?" Rand asked her. "You know what that Aes Sedai said in front of Rhuidean. I will destroy you. Why aren't you plotting with Couladin to kill me?" Mat choked, and Egwene planted her fists on her hips, ready to lecture, but Rand kept his attention on Moraine. Instead of answering, she glared at him and left the tent. It was Bear who spoke. "Everyone thinks they know the prophecy of Rhuidean, but what they know is what Wise Ones and clan chiefs have told them for generations. Not lies, but not the whole truth. The truth might break the strongest man." "What is the whole truth?" Rand insisted. She glanced at Mat, then said, "In this case, the whole truth, the truth known only to Wise Ones and clan chiefs before this, is that you are our doom. Our doom and our salvation. Without you, no one of our people will live beyond the last battle. Perhaps not even until the last battle. That is prophecy and truth. With you, he shall spill out the blood of those who call themselves Aiel as water on sand, and he shall break them as dried twigs. Yet the remnant of a remnant shall he save, and they shall live." A hard prophecy, but this has never been a gentle land. She met his gaze without flinching. A hard land and a hard woman. He rolled back over and returned to watching the valley. The others left, except for Mat. In the mid-afternoon, he finally spotted a figure climbing the mountain, scrambling up wearily. Aviendha. Mat had been right. She was bare as she was born, and showing some effects of the sun, too, ideal or not.
My lighter. Give me a second.
It was only her hands and face that were sun-darkened, and the rest of her looked decidedly red. He was glad to see her. She disliked him, but only because she thought he had mistreated Elaine. The simplest of motives. Not for prophecy or doom, not for the dragons on his arms, or because he was the dragon reborn. For a simple human reason. He almost looked forward to those cool, challenging stares. When she saw him, she froze. There was nothing cool in her blue-green eyes. Her gaze made the sun seem cold. He should have been burned to ash on the spot. Rand? Mat said quietly. "I don't think I would turn my back on her if I were you." A tired sigh escaped him. Of course. If she had been into those glass columns, she knew. Bear, Moraine, the others, they had all had years to grow used to it. For Aviendha, it was a fresh wound with no scab. No wonder she hates me now. The Wise Ones scurried out to meet Aviendha, hurrying her away into another tent. The next time Rand saw her, she wore a bulky brown skirt and loose white blouse, with a shawl looped around her arms. She did not look very happy about the clothes. She saw him watching, and the fury on her face, the sheer animal rage, was enough to make him turn away. Shadows were beginning to stretch to the far mountains by the time Moraine appeared. falling and staggering back to her feet as she climbed, the sunburned as Avienda. He was startled to see she had no clothes on either. Women were crazy, that was all. Lan leaped from the stone outcrop and ran down to her. Scooping her into his arms, he ran back upslope, perhaps faster than he had descended, cursing and shouting for the wise ones by turns. Moraine's head lolled on his shoulder. The wise ones came out to take her, Elaine physically barring his way when he tried to follow them into the tent. Lan was left stalking up and down outside, pounding a fist into his hand. Brand rolled onto his back and stared up at the low tent roof. 3 days saved. He should have felt glad Moraine and Avienda were back and safe, but his relief was all for days saved. Time was everything. He had to be able to choose his own ground. Maybe he still could. What are you going to do now? Matt asked. Something you should like. I'm going to break the rules. I meant, are you going to get something to eat? Me, I'm hungry. In spite of himself, Rand laughed. Something to eat. He did not care if he ever ate again. Matt stared at him as if he were crazy, and that only made him laugh harder. Not crazy. For the first time, somebody was going to learn what it meant that he was the Dragon Reborn. He was going to break the rules in a way no one expected.
Chapter 35. Sharp Lessons. The heart of the stone in Tel Ayran-Riyadh was as Egwene remembered it in the real world. Huge, polished redstone columns rising to a distant ceiling, and beneath the great central dome, Kalandor driven into the pale floor stones. Only people were missing. The golden lamps were not lit, yet there was a sort of light, somehow dim and sharp at the same time, that seemed to come from everywhere at once, or nowhere. It was often like that, indoors in Tel Ayran-Riyadh. What she did not expect was the woman standing beyond the glittering crystal sword and peering off into the pallid shadows among the columns. The way she was dressed startled Egwene. Bare feet and wide trousers of brocaded yellow silk. Above a darker yellow sash, she was quite bare, except for gold chains hanging around her neck. Tiny gold rings decorated her ears in sparkling rows, and, most startling of all, another pierced her nose, with a thin medallion-lined chain running from nose ring to one of the rings in her left ear. "Elaine?" Egwene gasped, gathering her shawl around her as though she were the one with no blouse. She had garbed herself as a wise one this time, for no particular reason. The daughter heir leaped, and when she came down facing Egwene, she was wearing a demure gown of pale green with a high embroidered neck and long sleeves that dangled points over her hands. No earrings, no nose ring. "It is how the sea folk women dress at sea," she said hurriedly, with a furious blush. "I wanted to see how it felt, and this seemed the best place. I couldn't do it on the ship, after all." "How does it feel?" Egwene asked curiously. "Cold, actually." Elaine looked around at the surrounding columns. "And it makes you feel people are staring at you, even when there's no one there." Abruptly, she laughed. "Poor Tom and Jewelin. They do not know where to look most of the time. Half the crew are women." Studying the columns herself, Egwene shrugged uncomfortably. It did feel as if they were being watched. No doubt it was just because they were the only people in the stone. No one who had access to Tel Ayran-Riyadh could expect to find anyone to watch here. "Tom? Tom Marilyn? And Jewelin Sandar? Are they with you?" "Oh, Egwene, Rand sent them. Rand and Lan. Well, Moraine sent Tom, actually, but Rand sent Master Sandar to help us. Nynaeve is quite set up about it, about Lan, though of course she won't let on." Egwene smothered a small smile. Nynaeve was set up. Elaine's face was beaming, and her dress had changed again to a much lower neckline, apparently without her realizing it. The Terangrial twisted stone ring helped the daughter heir reach the world of dreams as easily as Egwene did, but it did not confer control. That had to be learned. Stray thoughts, such as how she might like to look for Rand, could still alter things for Elaine. How is he? Elaine's voice was a strange blend of forced casualness and apprehension. Well, Egwene said, I think he is. She made it a full report. The portal stones and Roydian, as much as she knew from what she had heard, what she had managed to infer from talk of seeing through ancestors' eyes, the strange creature from the dragon banner marked on Rand's forearms, Bear's revelation that he was the Aiel's doom, the summons of the clan chiefs to Alcair Dal. Amis and the other wise ones should be doing that even now. She fervently hoped they were. She even told the strange story of Rand's true parents, in a shorter form. I don't know, though. He has been acting stranger than ever since, and Matt hardly less. I don't mean that he's mad, but he is as hard as Ruark or Lamb, in some ways at least, maybe harder. He's planning something, I think. Something he doesn't mean anybody to know, and he is in a rush to get to it. It is worrying. Sometimes I have the feeling he doesn't see people anymore, only pieces on a stone's board. Elaine did not look worried, or not about that, at any rate. He is what he is, Egwene. A king or a general cannot always afford to see people. When a ruler has to do what is right for a nation, there are times when some will be hurt by what is best for the whole. Rand is a king, Egwene, even if without a nation unless you count Tyr, and if he won't do anything that will hurt anyone, he will end by hurting everyone. Egwene sniffed. It might make sense, but she did not have to like it. People were people, and they had to be seen as people. There is more. Some of the wise ones can channel. I don't know how many, but I suspect more than a few to some degree. From what Amis tells me, they find every last woman who has the spark born in her. No Aiel women died trying to teach themselves to channel, while not even knowing what they were trying to do. There was no such thing as a wilder among the Aiel. Men who learned they could channel faced a grimmer fate. They went north, to the Great Blight, and maybe beyond, to the Blasted Lands and Shaiol Ghul. Going to kill the Dark One, they called it. None survived long enough to face madness. Avienda is one with the spark, it turns out. She'll be very strong, I think. Amis thinks so, too. Avienda, Elaine said, wonderingly. Of course. I should have known. I felt the same kinship for Joreen on first sight that I did for her, and for you, for that matter. Joreen? Elaine grimaced. I promised I would keep her secret, and the first chance I get I let my tongue run wild. Well, I don't suppose you will harm her or her sisters. Joreen is Windfinder on Wavedancer, Egwene. She can channel, and so can some of the other Windfinders. She glanced at the columns around them, and her neckline was suddenly back up under her chin. She adjusted a dark lace shawl that had not been there a moment before, covering her hair and shadowing her face. Egwene, you mustn't tell anyone. Joreen is afraid the Tower will try to force them to become Aes Sedai, or try to control them in some fashion. I promised I would do what I can not to let that happen. I won't tell, Egwene said slowly. Wise ones and Windfinders, women able to channel among both, and none who had taken the 3 oaths, bound by the Oath Rod. The oaths were supposed to make people trust Aes Sedai, or at least not fear their power, but Aes Sedai still had to move in secret as often as not. Wise ones, and Windfinders, she was willing to wager, had honored places in their societies, without being bound to supposedly make them safe. It was something to think on. Nynaeve and I are ahead of schedule too, Egwene. Joreen has been teaching me to work the weather. You would not believe the size of the flows of air she can weave. And between us we've had Wavedancer moving as fast as he ever has, and that is fast. We should be in Tanchico in another 3 days, maybe 2, according to Coeen. She's the sail mistress, the captain. 10 days from Tyr to Tanchico, perhaps. That is with stopping to talk with every Athaan Mier ship we see. Egwene, the sea folk think Rand is their Coramor. They do? Corinne has some of what happened in Tyr wrong. She assumes the Aes Sedai serve Rand now, for one thing. Nynaeve and I thought it best not to put her straight about that. But as soon as she tells another sail mistress, they're all ready to spread the word and serve Rand. I believe they will do anything he asks of them. I wish the Aiel were so accepting, Egwene sighed. Ruark thinks some of them might refuse to acknowledge him, Roidian dragons or no. One fellow, a man called Couladin, I'm sure would kill him in a minute given half a chance. Elaine took a step forward. You will see that doesn't happen. It was not a question or a request. There was a sharp light in her blue eyes and a bared dagger in her hand. I will do the best I can. Ruark is giving him bodyguards. Elaine seemed to see the dagger for the first time and gave a start. The blade vanished. You must teach me whatever Armis is teaching you, Egwene. It is disconcerting to have things appear and disappear, or suddenly realize I'm wearing different clothes. It just happens. I will, when I have time. She had been in Tel Run-Riog too long already. Elaine, if I am not here when we are supposed to meet next, don't worry. I will try, but I may not be able to come. Be sure to tell Nynaeve. If I do not come, check every night thereafter. I won't be more than 1 or 2 late, I'm sure. If you say so, Elaine said doubtfully. It will surely take weeks to find out if Leandrin and the others are in Tanchico or not. Tom seems to think the city will be very confused. Her eyes went to Kalandor, driven half its length into the floor. Why did he do that, do you think? He said it will hold the Tyrants to him. As long as they know it's there, they have to know he is coming back. Maybe he knows what he is talking about. I hope so. I thought perhaps he was angry about something. Egwene frowned at her. This sudden diffidence was not like Elaine at all. Angry about what? Oh, nothing. It was just a thought. Egwene, I gave him 2 letters before leaving Tyr. Do you know how he took them? No, I don't. Did you say something you think might have angered him? Of course not, Elaine laughed gaily. It sounded forced. Her dress was suddenly dark wool, stout enough for a hard winter. I would have to be a fool to write things to make him angry. Her hair sprang up in all directions, like a crazed crown. She was not aware of it. I am trying to make him love me, after all. Just trying to make him love me. Oh, why can't men be simple? Why do they have to cause such difficulties? At least with a wig, Arrowhead. The wool became silk again, cut even lower than before. Her hair made shimmers on her shoulders to shame the gown's sheen. She hesitated, nibbling her lower lip. Egwene, if you find the chance, would you tell him I meant what I said in... Egwene? Egwene? Something snatched Egwene. The heart of the stone dwindled into blackness, as if she were being hauled away by the scruff of her neck. With a gasp, Egwene started awake, heart pounding, staring up the low roof of the night-darkened tent over her head. Only a little moonlight crept in at the open sides. She lay under her blankets. The waste was as cold at night as it was hot during the day, and the brazier that exuded the sweetish smell of dried dung burning gave little warmth. Beneath her blankets, right where she had lain down to sleep. But what had pulled her back? Abruptly, she became aware of Armis, sitting cross-legged beside her, cloaked in shadows. The Wise One's murk-shrouded face seemed as dark and foreboding as the night. "Did you do that, Armis?" she said angrily. "You have no right to just haul me about. I am Aes Sedai of the Green Ajah." The lie came easily to her lips now. "And you have no right..." Armis cut her off with a grim voice. "Beyond the Dragon Wall, in the White Tower, you are Aes Sedai. Here you are an ignorant pupil, A fool child crawling through a den of vipers. I know I said I would not go to Tel Riyadh without you, Egwene said, trying to sound reasonable. But something seized her ankles, hauled her feet into the air. Blankets tumbled away. Her shift dropped to bunch in her armpits. Upside down, she hung with her face level with that of Amis. Furious, she opened herself to saidar and found herself blocked. You wanted to go off alone, Amis hissed softly. You were warned, but you had to go. Her eyes seemed to glow in the dark, brighter and brighter. Never a care for what might be waiting. There are things in dreams to shatter the bravest heart. Around eyes like blue coals, her face melted and stretched. Scales sprouted where skin had been, her jaws thrust out, lined with sharp teeth. Things to eat the bravest heart, she growled. Screaming, Egwene battered vainly at the shield holding her from the true source. She tried to beat at that horrible face, at the thing that could not be Amis, but something gripped her wrists, stretched her taut and quivering in midair. All she could do was shriek as those jaws closed around her face. Screaming, Egwene sat up, clutching at her blankets. With an effort, she managed to snap her mouth shut, but she could do nothing about the shudders that racked her. She was in the tent, or was she? There was Amis, cross-legged in the shadows, glowing with saidar, or was it she? Desperately, she opened herself to the source, and nearly howled when she found the barrier again. Tossing the blankets aside, she scrambled across the layered rugs on hands and knees, scattered her neatly folded clothes with both hands. She had a belt knife. Where was it? Where? There. Sit down, Amis said acerbically, before I dose you for vapors and fidgets. You will not like the taste. Egwene twisted around on her knees, the short knife held in both hands. They would have trembled if not clutched together around the hilt. Is it really you this time? I am myself, now and also then. Sharp lessons are the best lessons. Do you mean to stab me? Hesitating, Egwene sheathed the knife. You have no right to. I have every right. You gave me your word. I did not know Aes Sedai could lie. If I am to teach you, I must know you will do as I say. I will not watch a pupil of mine cut her own throat. Amis sighed. The glow around her vanished, and so did the barrier between Egwene and saidar. I cannot shield you any longer. You are far stronger than I. In the one power you are. You very nearly battered down my shield. But if you cannot keep your word, I do not know that I want to instruct you. I will keep my word, Amis. I promise I will. But I have to meet with my friends in Tel Riyadh. I promised them, too. Amis, they might need my help, my advice. Amis's face was not easy to make out in the darkness, but Egwene did not see any softening. Please, Amis, you've taught me so much already. I think I could find them wherever they are now. Please don't stop me when there is so much yet for me to learn. Whatever you want me to do, I will. Braid your hair, Amis said in a flat tone. My hair, Egwene said uncertainly. It would certainly be no inconvenience, but why? She wore it loose now, falling below her shoulders, yet it was not that long ago that she had almost burst with pride on the day the women's circle back home had said she was old enough to put her hair in a braid, like the one Nynaeve still wore. In the Two Rivers, a braid said you were old enough to be considered a woman. One over each ear. Amis's voice was still like a flat rock. If you have no ribbon to twine in the braids, I will give you some. That is how little girls wear their hair among us. Girls too young to be held to their word. When you prove to me that you can keep yours, you can stop wearing it. But if you lie to me again, I will make you cut your skirts off short, like little girls' dresses, and find you a doll to carry. When you decide to behave as a woman, you will be treated as a woman. Agree to it, or I will teach you no more. I will agree if you will accompany me when I must meet. Agree, Aes Sedai. I do not bargain with children, or those who cannot keep their word. You will do as I say, accept what I choose to give, and no more. Or else go off and get yourself killed on your own. I will not aid it. Egwene was glad of the dark. It hid her skull. She had given her word, but this was all so unfair. No one was trying to hedge Rand around with silly rules. Well, perhaps he was different. She was not sure she wanted to trade Amice's edicts for Couladin's desiring to put a spear through her in any case. Mat would certainly not put up with other people's rules. Yet, Taviran or not, Mat had nothing to learn. All he had to do was be. Very likely he would refuse to learn anything given the chance, unless it had to do with gambling or raising food. She wanted to learn. Sometimes it seemed an unending thirst. However much she absorbed, she could not quench it. That still did not make it fair. Only the way things are, she thought ruefully. I agree, she said. I will do as you say, accept what you give, and no more. Good. After a long pause, as if waiting to see whether Egwene wanted to say more, she wisely held her tongue. Amice added, I mean to be hard on you, Egwene, but not without purpose. That you think I have taught you much already only shows how little you knew to begin. You have a strong talent for the dream. Very likely you will outstrip any of us by far one day. But if you do not learn what I can teach you, what we four can all teach you, you will never develop that talent fully. It is most likely you will not live long enough to do so. I will try, Amice. She thought she managed a good approximation of meekness. Why did the woman not say what she wanted to hear? If Egwene could not go to Tel Riyadh alone, then Amice had to come too when she next met Elaine. Or it might be Nynaeve next time. Good. Do you have anything else to say? No, Amice. The pause was longer this time. Egwene waited as patiently as she could, hands folded on her knees. So you can hold your demands inside when you wish, Amice said at last, even if it does make you twitch like a goat with the itch. Do I mistake the cause? I can give you an ointment. No? Very well. I will accompany you when you must meet your friends. Thank you, Egwene said primly. A goat with an itch indeed. In case you did not listen when I first told you, learning will be neither easy nor short. You think you have worked these last days. Prepare to give real time and effort now. Amice, I will learn as much as you can teach me, and I will work as hard as you want. But between Rand and the Dark Friends, time to learn may turn out to be a luxury and my purse empty. I know, Amice said wearily. He troubles us already. Come, you have wasted enough time with your childishness. There is women's business to be discussed. Come, the others are waiting. For the first time, Egwene realized Moiraine's blankets were empty. She reached for her dress, but Amice said, That will not be needed. We only go a short way. Throw a blanket around your shoulders and come. I have done a great deal of work for Rand al'Thor already, and I must do more when we are finished. Shrugging a blanket around her doubtfully, Egwene followed the older woman into the night. It was cold. Skin turning to tight goosebumps, she hopped from barefoot to barefoot over stony ground that seemed little short of ice. After the heat of day, the night seemed as frigid as the heart of a Two Rivers winter. Her breath turned to thin mist in front of her mouth, absorbed immediately by the air. Cold or not, the air was still dry. At the rear of the Wise One's camp stood a small tent she had not seen before, low like the others, but staked tightly down all around. To her surprise, Amice began stripping off her clothes, then motioned her to do the same. Clenching her teeth to keep them from chattering, she followed Amice's example slowly. When the Aiel woman had shed down to her skin, she stood there just as if the night were not freezing. taking deep breaths and flailing herself with her arms before finally ducking inside. Egwene darted after her with alacrity. Damp heat hit her like a stick between the eyes. Sweat popped out of every pore. Moiraine was already there, and the other wise ones, and Aviendha, all bare-skinned and sweating, sitting around a large iron kettle full to the brim with sooty stones. Kettle and stones alike radiated heat. The Aes Sedai looked mostly recovered from her ordeal, though there was a tightness around her eyes that had not been there before. As Egwene was gingerly finding a place to sit, no layered rugs here, only rocky ground, Aviendha scooped a handful of water from a smaller kettle at her side and tossed it into the larger one. The water hissed to steam, leaving not even a damp spot on the stones. Aviendha had a sour look on her face. Egwene knew how she felt. Novices in the tower were also given chores. She was not sure if she had hated scrubbing floors more than pots or the other way around. This task did not look nearly so onerous. "We must discuss what to do about Randall Thor," Bear said when Amis was seated too. "Do about him?" Egwene said, alarmed. "He has the signs. He is the one you have been looking for." "He is the one," Mylane said grimly, brushing long strands of red gold hair from her damp face. "We must try to see that as many of our people as possible survive his coming." "Just as importantly," Siana said, "we must assure that he survives to fulfill the rest of the prophecy." Mylane glared at her, and Siana added in a patient tone, "Else none of us will survive." "Ruark said he would set some of the Jindo for bodyguards," Egwene said slowly. "Has he changed his mind?" Amis shook her head. "He has not. Randall Thor sleeps in the Jindo tents with 100 men awake to see he wakes as well. But men often see things differently than we. Ruark will follow him, perhaps oppose him in decisions he thinks are wrong, but he will not try to guide him." "Do you think he needs guiding?" Moiraine arched an eyebrow at that, but Egwene ignored it. "He has done what he had to without guidance so far."
One second, everyone, be right back.
Ways, Amis replied. "There are 100 mistakes he could make to turn a chief or clan against him, to make them see a wetlander instead of he who comes with the dawn. My husband is a good man and a fine chief, but he is no peace talker, trained to guide angry men to ground their spears. We must have someone close to Randall Thor who can whisper in his ear when he seems ready to step wrongly." She motioned Aviendha to throw more water on the hot rocks. The younger woman complied with a sullen grace. "And we must watch him," Mylane put in sharply. "We must have some idea of what he means to do before he does it. The fulfillment of the prophecy of Roidian has begun. It cannot be halted short of its end, one way or another, but I mean to see that as many of our people survive as is possible. How that can be managed depends on what Randall Thor intends." Bear leaned toward Egwene. She seemed to be all bone and sinew. "You have known him from childhood. Will he confide in you?" "I doubt it," Egwene told her. "He does not trust as he used to." She avoided looking at Moiraine. "Would she tell us if he did confide?" Mylane demanded. "I raise no anger here, but Egwene and Moiraine are Aes Sedai. What they seek may not be what we seek." "We served Aes Sedai once," Bear said simply. "We failed them then. Perhaps we are meant to serve again." Mylane flushed with obvious embarrassment. Moiraine gave no sign that she saw, or that she had heard the woman's earlier words, for that matter. Except for that tightness around her eyes, she looked as calm as ice. "I will help as I can," she said coolly. "But I have little influence with Rand. For the present he weaves the pattern to his own design." "Then we must watch him closely and hope," Bear sighed. "Aviendha, you will meet Randall Thor when he wakes each day, and do not leave him until he goes to his blankets at night. You will stay as close to him as the hair on his head. Your training must come as we can manage, I fear. It will be a burden on you doing both things, but it cannot be avoided. If you talk to him, and especially listen, you should have no trouble remaining near him. Few men will send away a pretty young woman who listens to them. Perhaps he will let something slip. Aviendha grew stiffer by the word. When Bear finished, she spat. I will not. Dead silence fell, and every eye swung to her, but she stared back defiantly. Will not, Bear said softly. Will not. She seemed to be tasting words strange in her mouth. Aviendha, Egwene said gently. No one is asking you to betray Elaine, only to talk to him. If anything, the former Maiden of the Spear looked even more eager to find herself a weapon. Is this the discipline maidens learn now? Amis said sharply. If it is, you will find we teach a harder. If there is some reason you cannot stay near to Rand al'Thor, speak it. Aviendha's defiance wilted a trifle, and she mumbled inaudibly. Amis's voice took on a knife edge. I said, speak it. I do not like him, Aviendha burst out. I hate him. Hate him. Had Egwene not known better, she would have thought her close to tears. The words shocked her, though. Surely Aviendha could not mean it. We are not asking you to love him or take him to your bed, Siana said acidly. We are telling you to listen to the man, and you will obey. Childishness, Amis snorted. What kind of young women is the world producing now? Do none of you grow up? Bear and Melaine were even sharper, with the older woman threatening to tie Aviendha on Rand's horse in place of his saddle. She sounded as if she meant it precisely, and Melaine suggesting that instead of sleep, Aviendha should perhaps spend the night digging holes and filling them in to clear her head. The threats were not intended to coerce her, Egwene realized. These women expected and intended to be obeyed. Any useless labor Aviendha earned herself would be for being stubborn. That stubbornness seemed to be shrinking. With 4 sets of wise one's eyes boring at her, she settled into more of a defensive crouch on her knees, but she was holding on. Egwene leaned over to put a hand on Aviendha's shoulder. You've told me we are near sisters, and I think we are. Will you do it for me? Think of it as looking after him for Elaine. You like her too, I know. You can tell him she says she meant what she said in her letters. He will like hearing that. Aviendha's face spasmed. I will do it, she said, slumping. I will watch him for Elaine. For Elaine. Amis shook herself. Foolishness. You will watch him because we told you to, girl. If you think you have another reason, you will find you are painfully mistaken.
Oh, you're caught into this life for
The
tonight.
steam is fading.
I want to thank Aaron for stopping by. Aaron, he keeps coming back by, chilling with me. Just appreciate all y'all's support.
Spirit was
Till next time, everyone.
But there were some women.
Y'all stay safe out there.